But okay, so I was able to depart in this art world, in the art language, and to start kind of layering this and making it interesting enough that a group of a community of white, middle to upper class corporations and so on and so forth were interested enough in a low-income black neighborhood of shotgun houses. It takes quite a bit of bullshit to do that. but so in the process of doing that, starting to kind of figure out, how, what value could it bring. The other side of it, the other two sides of it too, is that at its heart, Project Row House has always been about, how do we help empower this community, right? But on the other side, to actually make it go and make it float, we rely so much on patronage. And patronage is a funny thing because it can trap us. And I think you all might know what I mean. I'll get into that a little bit later. So we're very, very fortunate at, I was very fortunate to be able to bring something to an activist community that I was involved in, and I was getting my ass kicked on all this stuff, but I got a little bit of reprieve because I had a connection to other resources that could kind of, accompany the efforts that were going on. And which put me in a very privileged place. And I always try to, I know my privilege. I mean, my privilege comes with, coming out of an arts background when it comes to working within the Third Ward, where my mentor, Lowe Parker, who's been running his community center for some 40 plus years, I have to support him because he didn't have access to the kind of resources that I can access. But through this, we've been able to offer things, positive things within the growth of the community around architecture. There are these things that we looked at with John Bigger's work that I kind of teased out and talked about that was important in building community. It was architecture, art and creativity, education, social services, social safety net, and sustainability. So within the arts, we've been privileged to have artists that come into this community and offer incredibly empowering and uplifting opportunities for people. And but then also, being there in that community and offering opportunities for those creative individuals to spring forth. The names of people there are just people that I'm just noticing that this is cut off a little bit on the side. Anyway, but these are names of people that are that grew up in the Project Row Houses context, right? Otabinga Jones and Associates, Robert Pruitt, Jamal Cyrus, Jabari Anderson, Kenya Evans, Autumn Knight, Levy Olivier, Robert Hodge, Daniel Donnan. I met one of his friends here. Yeah, there she is. Okay. Anyway, Onjabir Machwaya, Flower Man, who's a folk artist, neighborhood folk artist, Regina Agu, Billy Fortson, and then Trina Smith. The image at the bottom down there. Think of the range of people that that are empowered or share in the empowering process. This young woman, Trina Smith, she lived in a neighborhood and a little bit depressed until another one of my mentors, Jesse Lott, started talking to her about just drawing, just make stuff, and she just started, and now she has a emerging career as an artist. I mean, people coming by, checking out her work and stuff. Then education-wise, I only need this one image to just talk about the fact that Frances Elijah, who was a young woman that grew up hanging out at Project Row Houses and education programs, and now she's getting her PhD at Harvard and leading consulting groups on education reform. She's a brilliant young woman. And then the social safety net. Being able to focus people on housing and the impact that can have on people people's lives, has had huge impact, I think, for our neighborhood. And representing that, just a few images here, but I'll call your attention to the one at the bottom, Asada Richards. Left to right at the bottom is, left is a young, angry Asada Richards. The middle is Asada Richards finishing off her PhD at Penn State. And on the right is the Asada Richards who is the co-chair of the Houston Housing Authority, where she was appointed by the mayor. These are people that seeing the opportunity of seeing how and what happens when you provide opportunity over a long period of time for empowerment, and to see how it kind of works out and comes back. The one thing, though, that I would say that if there's any failure of Project Row Houses, I would, and being honest about it, I would say that balance between empowerment and patronage haunts me, right? While there are many moments I can talk about the empowerment, I also see that so much of what we do is on the backs of patronage. And how far can that really go? How long can that last? And that's one of the things that's been kind of driving our focus of late, and looking at supporting small businesses and helping people, who that we think will be investing in them now. They'll be able to invest in us in the future. The other thing that I've learned about Project Row Houses is, and about getting your ass kicked, is it comes often and it comes hard. I'll tell you a little story about someone that I've learned this lesson, and I have to relearn it all the time. But the time that I learned it, that has kind of stuck with me and is clearest, is through someone who's become a friend. But we kind of started out as foes. It's a guy that's about my age, named Garnett Coleman. And when I first moved to Houston, he owned a little coffee shop. And I would go there with my art buddies, and we would roll into his coffee shop, hang out, and whatever. And he was very cordial. And then a few years later, he ran for political office. And I supported his opponent because his opponent was more progressive, and that's what I felt was the right thing to do. And so when I started Project Row Houses, he was very cold to me. In fact, sometimes he was very, he would be aggressively angry toward the work that we were doing. But then after we by the way, he got elected, so he won. So that he had a certain level of power there. So over time, though, he started to realize that what we were doing was maybe it's a little deeper than, that he needed to be involved, because we started doing housing, and he was in the state legislature. So he started getting us money for housing, and then we started doing more housing, and then he started investing in us significantly. So one day he said, we need to clear the air, because if we're going to work together, we got to clear this up. And so we had lunch one day, and we sat there, and he said, do you know the story of the chicken and the pig? I said, no. I feel like I'm going to learn, so I'm going to get it. So he said, there was this farm where this guy, had a bunch of farm animals and stuff, and on the farm, though, for some reason the chicken and the pig became best buddies. And they were sitting there one day, the chicken and the pig sitting there, and the chicken said, pigs, aren't you tired of eating this kind of, all this crap we eat for breakfast all the time, all these seeds and all this stuff? You should eat something different. And the pig looked and said, okay, but like what? And the chicken thought about it for a while, and he looked back and says, how about bacon and eggs? And the pig said, wait a minute. That's a gift for you. You'll drop your egg off, but I got to give my skin. I got to give my body into this. said, my family's been in this neighborhood for 5 generations. He said, you come rolling in, you drop in, you'll lay your egg. If it doesn't work out, you'll go somewhere and lay another one. He says, but you know what? I'm here. And you have to honor that and respect that. And that was one of the first times that I really kind of understood, what does that mean, to be an outsider when you go in. We're chickens, right? We're chickens. We lay our eggs. If they work, we may grow. We may, gain something there and become more invested, or we may leave. So, but it's something that, that was one ass kicking that I kind of hold on to, and I keep it, and it's very dear to me. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about 2 projects here, but I'm still going to put them in the context of some things I'm thinking about. One of them is holding on to core principles and relishing at the opportunity or time when your principles, when things are not quite fitting within your principles, and you can say no. Because we have a tendency that we get so excited about doing work, and we're excited to do any work that we can do, that we just say yes. But sometimes it's great to really know where you are and what you think, and being able to say no. Now, this project I'm going to show is a proposal that I did with a team of people. We were selected as the winner of the commission, and it didn't quite work out. Now, and I want to also say that I'm not being critical of the people that were of the institution. I didn't think that our values lined up, and maybe they will at some point. I think they're great people, but it just didn't work out at this time. So I'm just going to show you, but how my investment, though, in the work that I do, I like to think of it as being vested in truly empowering people. How do I use the work that I do to actually, contribute in a significant way? So this project was a project, as you can see, the goals of this project were really exciting, right? I mean, when I read things like, integrating art into the everyday and the functional, engaging residents and local businesses, and those kind of things were really interesting to me. And the context was really interesting. Right? The story behind this little part of this neighborhood, and I'm not giving the name and information here because I don't want to put too much out there. But it was so apparently this neighborhood. I don't have a pointer, but okay. So if you see 1, 2, 3, 4, those streets dead end here. Apparently, at one point, you could drive through all the way, but in the 80s, crime got so bad that they put barricades at those streets so that when you drove in, you had to drive back out the same way, right? But things have changed, and so they thought, maybe we could do something else with these, these barricaded streets. So they wanted to do these things they call gateways. Now, the initial context of this was in kind of a public art framework, in which they wanted sculpture along these gateways, which was something that wasn't anything that I was interested in at all. But they convinced me to submit a proposal, and after going there, this is what we submitted for them. First of all, we acknowledged the fact that at the gateways where at these gateways were these little small buildings, and they were proposing that you would knock them down and replace them with sculpture. But the problem with that was that as I walked through the neighborhood and talked to people kept saying 2 things. They said, the first thing they say is that we know why you guys are coming to this neighborhood. You're just going to run us off. That was the first thing. There was a suspicion. And then the second thing they said was that if you really want to do something in this neighborhood that makes any sense, people need jobs. We need jobs, I mean, we don't care about this other stuff. And so I tried to take those 2 things to heart and try to figure out how we frame a project that would turn it a little bit differently, turn it around. And so what we did was instead of proposing something that was going to be, these standalone objects, we kind of proposed a program to kind of program these spaces, right? But to do it in a way in which we would utilize art and skill development around artistic and visual enhancement and landscaping. There was a landscape architect that was on our team. And so we thought, if we preserve these buildings and we did something in which we could engage people on finding the aesthetic of their community and doing it themselves, as well as the landscaping, then we could kind of figure this out. And then so the gateways, instead of having sculpture there, we'd have these zones, education, employment, social, recreational, and sculpture. Sculpture zones is, gotta have the art there that people can see. We were open to that. So we had these little buildings that we could kind of work with. And so evaluating other buildings in the neighborhood, it's interesting. I will say this is in South Florida. And, this is a historically African-American neighborhood, part of it is. And one of the big things that they talk about is this Moorish architecture, right? Which is like, what does that have to do with South Florida? But that's okay. But we know South Florida can do that. I mean, they have Mickey Mouse and all the other things that can make stuff up. So we said, well, let's work with that, and let's look at ways that we could find things that are kind of connected a little bit to African Americans and their heritage and stuff. So we thought about this tradition of African women who paint their houses and stuff. It's an ongoing practice, right? So what if we have, in our education zone, we're training people to do this kind of work, right? Making the patterns and so on and so forth, and doing the work, and they're actually being paid to do that, as opposed to farming out the fabrication of a sculpture in Colorado or somewhere, being shipped in and being placed in the neighborhood. And we just showed different kinds of contemporary ways that people do, patterns and stuff. So we went through, we just kind of talked about how, you want to engage people, right? So, there are all these fences and stuff, how do you negotiate with these, property owners and get them to let you to do things like that, individual homes and stuff. We talked about even businesses, how do you get them to tie them in, right? And so you have these zones, where you're actually teaching people, training them, the education zone, teaching them how to do this, employment, helping people understand, how to, maybe they're being employed within the context of the project, or maybe we're preparing them for employment in other areas. And social zones, how do you, take some of these spaces and emphasize some of the kind of social activities that are already happening. And this one similarly with the recreational stuff. At the top middle is a little makeshift soccer space that people were using. And then of course dominoes on every corner. And then with a sculpture zone, then you can kind of have a little space where you can do that. But key to it though was to really take though this kind of slow growth process of engaging people, training them, and helping them understand how to give their own place in aesthetic, right? So you take a typical site, so there's some preservation stuff that could happen here with the buildings, then you slowly start with the kind of painting kinds of things. And as you keep going, then you add in landscaping and get more fancy, then you can even get a buffet in the middle of it. But the point was like, but this is a slow growth process that you're investing in people. And then we tried to show the numbers, how this works, right? That on the front end, where the highest investment is in the residents, because they need jobs. The artists are there to assist them and to support them in their stuff. And then over time, it starts to shift because we're hoping that many of these people that we've trained we can place them out in other places to work. And then you may end up getting more opportunities for artists to actually work in an ongoing way in the community and to continue the process. Now, I would give them credit that actually this past week, in fact, I'm going next week, I'm going to go and check it out and see how it went, but I pulled these images from online that looks at what they were doing this past week. That's called the they did a paint day. So they kind of, I think, took some of the idea of what we were doing, the form of the idea, right? That they do these paint day things. So that's kind of a bit of the form. But the content of it, from our standpoint, was not to have people in the community to go out and volunteer their time to do this work when consultants are designing and pay all the paid people are the people that are coming from the outside. Our thing was to look at this and say, how do you spread that around a little bit? And also, I think you find something a little bit more authentic in the process too.